We looked the other time at Judges chapter 17, where we saw how an immoral man, after all he stole a fortune from his own mother, how he started an idolatrous religion. And we saw also how a renegade Levite became his priest, his hireling-priest. And now here in chapter 18 we see how the sin of these few individuals leads to the rebellion of an entire tribe against God, and actually has repercussions throughout history into our present time and even the future. So we turn to chapter 18 and we begin by reading verses 1 and 2. In those days there was no king in Israel, and in those days the tribe of the Danites sought them an inheritance to dwell in. For unto that day all their inheritance had not fallen unto them among the tribes of Israel. And the children of Dan sent of their family 5 men from their coasts, men of valor, from Zorah and from Eshtaol, to spy out the land and to search it. And they said unto them, Go, search the land. Who, when they came to Mount Ephraim, to the house of Micah, they lodged there. So part of the tribe of Dan had not yet taken the possession, of their allotted land. Apparently they found it hard to conquer. And so they sent out spies to look for a better place. And they happened to end up at Micah's house. What a coincidence. So I showed on the map where the Danites had their allotted space. But yeah, as said, they were not happy with it or not able to take full possession of it. So they travel eastward to the mountains of Ephraim and end up at Micah's house. And so if you think that's a coincidence, well, see what happens next. Verse 3. When they were by the house of Micah, they knew the voice of the young man, the Levite, and they turned in thither. And they said unto him, Who brought thee hither? And what makest thou in this place? And what hast thou here? And he said unto them, Thus and thus dealeth Micah with me, and he hath hired me, and I am his priest. And they said unto him, Ask counsel, we pray thee, of God, that we may know whether our way which we go shall be prosperous. And the priest said unto them, Go in peace. Before the Lord is your way wherein you go. Strangely enough, the spies recognized the Levite. We do not know how they knew him, and actually we don't know whether they knew him personally. It may be so that the paths had crossed before. After all, the Levite had been searching for a place to stay. And so it could be they knew him personally. It's also possible that it was because of his accent that they could hear that he was not from that region. In any case, the priest briefs them on the new religion that has been established in the house of Micah. And this is the beginning of another twist in an already strange story. Apparently, the Danites are totally okay with this religion. And they even believe that God is okay with it too. They don't question it for a second. On the contrary, they ask the priest to inquire of God whether their mission will be successful. So, picture this, a group of disobedient Danites on a sinful mission asks a sinful, disobedient Levite what the righteous God thinks of their undertaking. I don't think it's very hard to figure out the answer. However, the Levite doesn't give them the true answer, but the answer that they want to hear. He sends them on their way with God's blessing. and he refers to God as the God of Israel, Yahweh. It only shows how spiritually confused Israel had become. But we should also recognize this behavior. Is it any different from world leaders visiting the Vatican in order to get instructed and blessed? Or than world leaders visiting the tomb and shrine of some venerated rabbi? Or what we see here in Greece, an Orthodox priest going from house to house to give their blessing to an otherwise godless household, leaving a charcoal cross on the lintel of the front door, and by the way, receiving a nice sum of money for doing so. Is that any different? No. It is a form of godliness, but it is totally denying the power thereof. The story continues. Verse 7. Then the 5 men departed and came to Laish, and saw the people that were therein, how they dwelt careless, after the manner of the Sidonians, quiet and secure. And there was no magistrate in the land that might put them to shame in anything. And they were far from the Sidonians, and had no business with any man. And they came unto their brethren to Zorah and Eshtaol, and their brethren said unto them, What say ye? And they said, Arise, that we may go up against them, for we have seen the land, and behold, it is very good. And are you still? Be not slothful to go, and to enter to possess the land. When you go, you shall come unto a people secure, and to a large land, for God hath given it into your hands, a place where there is no want of anything that is in the earth. All the way up north, the Danites found a city that was not occupied by Israelites, but it was a colony, you could say an enclave of the Sidonians. It was actually a people of which God had instructed the Israelites to drive them out of Canaan. But they had yet failed to do so. And we can read about that in Joshua in chapter 13. And I will read the verses 1 and 4, where it says, Now Joshua was old and stricken in years, and the Lord said unto him, Thou art old and stricken in years, and there remaineth yet very much land to be possessed. From the south all the land of the Canaanites, and Meara, that is beside the Sidonians, up to Aphek, to the borders of the Amorites. So yes, a lot of land had not yet been taken in possession, and this was part of it. So the Danites saw that the land was good and not heavily defended. The Sidonians lived under a false security. And so the Danites make up to go and conquer it. And most likely the blessing that the Levite priests had given them was in their minds. They knew, and actually they say so as we just read, that God had given it into their hands. We continue then in verse 11. And there went from thence of the family of the Danites out of Zorah and out of Eshtaol 600 men, appointed with the weapons of war. And they went up and pitched in Kiriath Jearim in Judah, wherefore they called that place Mahanedan unto this day. Behold, it is behind Kiriath Jearim. And they passed thence unto Mount Ephraim, and came unto the house of Micah. So once again, these 5 spies, they have returned, and now a group of 600 go up to take Laish. And they take the same route apparently, and come again to the house of Micah. Now all this, and also what we read before in Judges chapter 17, is we can say directed by Satan and his minions. It is a setup for something larger. And this is none of it is coincidence, of course. So, although they are unable and unwilling to take possession of a place inside their own allotment, they were able to assemble an army of 600 men to fight a distant battle. And it's often so that distant battles seem easier than close battles. But God never told them to do so. And God is not telling us to do so, to pick and choose what we like. He simply wants us to obey. And these men were clearly not obeying God. Although God had instructed Joshua to take all of the land, and that had not happened, that doesn't mean that God was sanctioning this particular mission here. And things would actually go from bad to worse. And that begins here, or continues here, I would say, at the house of Micah. In verse 14, Then answered the 5 men that went to spy out the country of Laish, and said unto their brethren, Do you know that there is in these houses an ephod and a teraphim, and a graven image and a molten image? Now therefore consider what ye have to do. And they turned thitherward, and came to the house of the young man the Levite, even unto the house of Micah, and saluted him. And the 600 men appointed with their weapons of war, which were of the children of Dan, stood by the entering of the gate. And the 5 men that went to spy out the land went up, and came in thither, and took the graven image, and the ephod, and the teraphim, and the molten image. And the priest stood in the entering of the gate, with the 600 men that were appointed with weapons of war. And these went into Micah's house, and fetched the carved image, the ephod, and the teraphim, and the molten image. So the troop of 600 heavily armed men end up on the doorstep of Micah's house. The 5 spies had been there before, and although in complete disobedience to God, they believed they had a blessing of God, given by the Levite priest. And our first response may be that all this is folly. But actually, many Christians act exactly like that. They do whatever they want to do, what seems right in their own eyes. And meanwhile, they think or even expect that God blesses their undertaking. And yes, there is always a Levite around to tell them it is okay. As Paul writes to Timothy, to their own lusts they heap to themselves teachers, having itching ears. But these ungodly Danites, on their ungodly mission, thought it would even be better to have gods going with them. And so they violently and forcibly take the graven and molten image, the ephod, which the priest needs to do his work, and all the household gods, the teraphim. How ironic to use godless means to obtain gods and then expect those same gods to work in your favor. And how blasphemous, I might add, to say that all these gods represent Yahweh, the God of Israel. Verse 18, second half. Then said the priest unto them, What do you? And they said unto him, Hold thy peace, lay thine hand upon thy mouth, and go with us, and be to us a father and a priest. Is it better for thee to be a priest unto the house of one man, or that thou be a priest unto a tribe and a family in Israel? And the priest's heart was glad, and he took the ephod and the teraphim and the graven image, and went in the midst of the people. And so they turned and departed, and put the little ones and the cattle and the carriage before them. So at first the Levite priest protested. Hey, what are you doing? After all, his job and his livelihood were on the line. But he quickly receives a threat. Be silent or else. And the threat is followed by an offer. After all, the Danites needed a priest along with their newly acquired gods. And the Levite doesn't need to think twice. He has no loyalty towards Micah. He does not need to inquire what God wants him to do. No. This is a one-in-a-lifetime chance, a wonderful career move, a nice promotion. He'd been promoted to be the priest of an entire tribe. This is the behavior of a hireling, but it's also foreshadowing the ease and the speed with which the false religions of the world will switch to the one world religion of the beast. I pointed this also out last time. This story foreshadows that event, final religion, world religion. And we see that it is being set up by Satan and his minions. It's being set up, and then it will be taken over and moved into the last phase. And is it not noteworthy that it is the tribe of Dan that is doing this? Because if we look in the book of Revelation, among the 144,000, the 12 tribes that are listed there, Dan is missing. And there's always been a lot of speculation about that. Many believe that the Antichrist will be from the tribe of Dan. And that might very well be so. But it is these actions here with which Dan is excluding itself from the house of Israel. And actually setting up that which will eventually lead to the world religion that is promoted by the false prophet. So if not the Antichrist is from the tribe of Dan, maybe the false prophet has some link with that. Although he could also be a Levite or none of the above. Remains to be seen. The Levite is happy here in our story. He's so happy that he immediately offers even to carry the ephod and the gods for them. And on they go. Verse 22. And when they were a good way from the house of Micah, the men that were in the houses near to Micah's house were gathered together and overtook the children of Dan. And they cried unto the children of Dan, and they turned their faces and said unto Micah, What aileth thee, that thou comest with such a company? And he said, You have taken away my gods, which I made, and the priests, and you gone away. And what have I more? And what is this that you say unto me? What aileth thee? So the people of Micah's neighborhood, they try to overtake the Danites together with Micah. And it's literally so that Micah had to rescue his own gods. How ironic is that? And remember from the last time, Micah's name is Who is like Yahweh? Well, apparently he did not know the answer to that at all. We either worship the one true God or gods of our own making, which are always less than us, and they need to be protected and fought for. And we don't need to look far to see how people fight for and even are honored to martyr their lives for their God and their religion. That in and of itself should tell enough about their God and their religion. And the Danites ask Micah, What are you doing coming after us with all these people? And Micah answers, How can you ask me what's wrong with me? You took my gods and my priests. Well, when you have a hireling, you should take into account that there is always someone willing to pay a higher price. And as far as the gods, whatever can be taken from us has the signature of man on it. And Micah exclaims, What else have I got? What else have I got? And indeed, he had nothing. How privileged are we to have an eternal high priest who will never change or leave us, nor can be taken from us. But Micah's religion was empty. False religion is always empty. And again, I have to point to the book of Revelation, chapter 17, where we see that Mystery Babylon falls. The false religion that helped to make the beast system arise will also be overtaken by it, and it will fall and be destroyed. That is what happens to a false religion, an empty religion. And so, verse 25, the children of Dan said unto him, unto Micah, Let not thy voice be heard among us, lest angry fellows run upon thee, and thou lose thy life, with the lives of thy household. And the children of Dan went their way. And when Micah saw that they were too strong for him, he turned and went back to his house. Micah receives a very clear threat. Back off, or else. And just as before with the priest, it's the might of the Danites that convinces. And it shows the utter lawlessness in Israel. Micah assessed that they were too strong for him, and at least this time he faced reality and understood that his gods were of no good to him. It's not wise to follow a God that needs protection. Micah returns, and all the men of his neighborhood with him. Men that were equally upset because they most likely came to Micah's house to worship these gods. Verse 27 then continues, And they took the things which Micah had made, and the priest which he had, and came unto Laish, unto a people that were at quiet and secure. And they smote them with the edge of the sword, and burned the city with fire. And there was no deliverer, because it was far from Zidon. And they had no business with any man, and it was in the valley that lieth by Beth-rehob. And they built a city, and dwelt therein. And they called the name of the city Dan, after the name of Dan, their father, who was born unto Israel. Howbeit, the name of the city was Laish at the first. So the man who had stolen a fortune from his mother had now everything stolen from him, his gods, his priest, his entire religion. False religions and cults often have a total grip and influence on its followers, socially, financially, emotionally. That's basically actually the only way they can maintain themselves. On top of that, they have to do a lot of recruiting. When all that falls away, the person feels like having nothing left anymore. And that was the sad fate of Micah. We don't hear of him again. The city of Laish and the area around it were an enclave of Sidon in the north of Canaan. Now Sidon would ages later be the hometown of Jezebel. So not much good from there. But it was quite a distance away from Laish, and so they were not even aware of what was happening there, let alone that they would come to help. So the people in Laish, they lived actually far away from Sidon, and they lived in enemy territory basically. But they deemed themselves safe and secure, because for many years nothing had happened to them. Likewise, the people in the world will think they are safe and secure, but God will allow sudden destruction to come upon them. Now, of course, none of all this did justify what the Danites did, as they themselves were disobedient to God. And they called the name of the city Dan. It would become a landmark for the north of Israel. The expression would be for many years from Dan to Beersheba, which means from the north to the south of Israel, all of Israel. Dan would be the most northern city. The chapter concludes then, verse 30 and 31. And the children of Dan set up the graven image, and Jonathan, the son of Gershom, the son of Manasseh, and he and his sons were priests to the tribe of Dan, until the day of the captivity of the land. And they set them up Micah's graven image, which he made, all the time that the house of God was in Shiloh. What started in the house of Micah now becomes an official, established idolatry in Israel. More priests are assigned, not Levites, but men of Manasseh, the tribe who had its land allotted to the east of this northern part of Dan. Which means more disobedience also on the part of the men of Manasseh. Israel had gone astray completely, spiritually. Micah could not have imagined that his own sins, beginning with stealing 1100 shekels from his mother, would lead to an established idolatry in the land. This is how Satan works. This is how his minions work. It begins with a small sin, and from there it builds and builds. All this is a foreshadow of the beast system, of the false prophet, that will usurp man-made religions, I should say, and turn them into a new global religion, opposing God. And it's not by chance that Dan means judge or judgment. The closing remark of this chapter is telling volumes too. It says, all the time the house of God, the tabernacle, was in Shiloh. In other words, it was not so that there was no access to God. It was not so that they didn't know how to worship the true God. There was a house, there was an altar, there were priests. Unlike Micah and unlike the renegade priest and unlike the disobedient Danites, we better keep our eyes on the one true God and his eternal high priest. Not being distracted by religions that maybe have other motives and often are not true to God. Because deception will come, it's already here, and it will be pushed by force. You better comply or else, like the Danites threatened the Levite and threatened Micah. What we should do is hear his call of the true God, and stick to our calling. Unlike the Levite, unlike the man of the tribe of Manasseh, stick to our calling and obey God. Deception will soon come over the whole world in a way it has never been before. We better be ready. As long as we keep our eyes on the truth, which is Jesus, we cannot be deceived. And he will redeem us from this world one day soon. Amen.